going to join us, what I'd like to do is open the meeting, noting that we have a quorum, which I'll do in a minute. And then when she is able to attend, we will welcome her as well. So good morning and welcome to the October meeting of the Bethlehem IDA. Our first order of business is a call to order and a roll call to confirm that we have a quorum. So going alphabetically, Jared Fink.
Here.
Kate does anticipate joining us, but is not here at this time. David Cadera.
Present.
Thank you. Dick Cotlow. Tim Manisha.
Here.
And myself, Victoria Stores. So I note that we have a quorum and can open the meeting. And we just received a note. Kate, you are here. Thank you very much for joining us. So we have all current members. I will note that we continue to have a vacancy on the board and all 6 current members are present. So I'm calling this meeting to order at 8:03 a.m. So Kate, are you able to hear audio and participate via phone with us? I'm seeing you just on chat. Okay, we're working on it. So is there anything that the town or Robin or the tech people can do to help get Kate on via sound?
I can call her on my cell phone and put it on speaker.
We can try that, yes. Yeah, often Zoom has a dial-in number. Okay, it's the panelist link. Oh, okay. Robin, can you quickly resend no, I can do this. Under a new header, if the invitation to be a panelist goes into spam, which it does for me, I'm going to forward it under a completely different header, so hopefully it won't go into spam. And I will note, Robin and the other staff at the town really do work very hard to prevent this, but it's a substantial problem sometimes.
Okay, I think I'm in business here. There we go.
Thank you. Well done. All right, so we had just called the meeting to order. We have a quorum. We now have all active members of the IDA and 1 vacancy that I know that the town is working on filling for us. The next order of business is to approve the minutes from our regular meeting of September 24th. I have 1 amendment. I provided Robin with the details of the resolution closing our September 24th meeting. It was, and that will be approved, excuse me, that will be included in revised minutes. The motion to adjourn. I don't have that piece of paper in front of me. I do want to read it into the minutes. So I will open up the floor for other questions or adjustments to the minutes and get back to you with that information momentarily. Okay, I will read into the minutes the details of the adjournment. The result was a unanimous approval to adjourn. It was moved by Dick Kotlow, seconded by David Kidbera, and unanimously approved by all members present, closing the meeting. So hearing no questions or amendments to this September 24th regular meeting of the agency, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, David. Is there a second?
Second.
And that was you, Tim?
Yes, it was. Sorry.
Thank All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. The motion passes to approve the minutes. The next item on our agenda is the minutes of the special meeting that we held on October 13th, 2021, immediately after the public hearing on the Port of Albany application. Are there any questions or amendments to the minutes of the October 13th special meeting? Hearing none, do we have a motion for approval of those minutes?
So moved. Tim.
Tim, Dick, thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. The motion passes to approve the minutes. Our next order of business is reports of committees. The Finance Committee met on October 15th. It is comprised now of myself and Tim, who have been on it for some time. And this October, we welcomed Dick as our treasurer and the newest member of the Finance Committee. We met on the 15th to review agency financial history, our expectations for 2022, and a proposed budget for 2022 that you have in your packet this morning. The minutes of the Finance Committee meeting are in your packet. And I would like to ask for any questions or amendments and then ask for approval of those minutes this morning. Are there any questions or amendments on the Finance Committee minutes?
Victoria,
Yeah.
you don't have to have the full board approve the Finance Committee minutes. Finance Committee will approve it next time they meet.
Okay.
It's for their, it's to provide information to all the members.
Yes. I pulled up the October meeting from 2020, and the board was presented with the minutes and did approve them at that time.
Did they? Okay.
Yep. But we can certainly wait. I think what's important is that all of the members see the contents of the minutes and have the ability to ask questions about the discussion, and then we'll present the proposed budget. Okay, so skipping the approval of the minutes, we'll introduce the proposed budget. This is a column on page 12 of your packet. Page 12 presents the financial history of the agency, and there is a column third from the right with 2022 projected. This is the proposed budget. It reflects a reduction in cost for agency staff based on our current use patterns and activity. Part of the savings is in anticipation of having our next executive director and agency counsel engaged through a contract rather than as direct town staff. Tom will talk about that process under new business. This budget has been reviewed with the town, who has not suggested any changes to it. So I'll turn the floor over to Dick to review the budget for us this morning.
Thank you, Victoria. First of all, I'd like to thank Al, Victoria, and Tom for compiling the information and working on it, and especially Al for getting us real good, real-time source data and information so we can meet and go over all the line items in the budget that we're going to discuss. In the budget, the first item is fee income, which is a placeholder of $25,000 for a proposed new approved IDA transaction. We currently have one in process and one moving right along in process. So, hopefully in 2022, we'll have fee income, and also there's a discussion later in the meeting on the port fee. The next item is $1,000 for application fees. We currently charge $500 per application, and that would be wonderful if we could get 2 new apps in for 2022. Annual fees, Al provided us with a run out of all of our continuing annual fees, and those are what are currently in place. We do note that there was quite a bit of discussion because PSEG burns out in a couple of years, so it's something that the Finance Committee is reviewing. Agency council fees is right now is a pass-through where we bill for reimbursement, and sometimes it flows through our books, sometimes it doesn't. But if you notice, there's 10,000 up in revenue, and there's also 10,000 in expense. So it's really just a placeholder. Energy reimbursement, you can see that and as Al has greatly reported over the year, our PSEG energy reimbursement is trending ahead for 2021, and I would assume, based on where energy rates are, the $70,000 is a good number. Maybe it'll be maybe it'll be a little bit better than that. So that brings us to total operating budgeted revenues of $122,744. We have investment earnings of $300. The as we all know, the investment earning market right now is non-existent. And so over the past year or so. In expenses, you can see, as Victoria just reported, we don't budget any salary and wages because, as Victoria stated, we're going to go into an independent contractor with Kate versus Tom as a salaried employee. And I think we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's why that's zero. Same with fringe benefits. In professional services, contracts, pass-throughs, if you go below under this little footnote D, it says town service fee $34,760 and executive director fee $50,000 and CFO fee $10,800. Victoria, as Victoria mentioned, because of she's really worked on the town fee and also right-sized it based upon the current economic conditions. Thank you.
And I'm going to step in here very briefly because the full board has not acted on the request to move our executive director and agency counsel from Tom to a new arrangement. So I would like to note that the board has not been asked to act and hasn't acted. So no official decision has been made. I appreciate your going through the line items of the budget.
Okay, fine. I see it corrected. A little bit for supplies and materials, and then there's $10,000 other operating expenses. And if you go to footnote F, it shows the audit fee of $3,600 dues, which are principally CEG and the town of Bethlehem chamber. $34.45, website fees $14.55, and a placeholder for other fees, which can include various training conference trips, et cetera, et cetera. So that brings that to $10,000, which has total expenses budgeted of and business economic. This is something that Victoria asked to be put in as a placeholder in case we want to do some economic studies for the town to increase our awareness of where commercial development would be beneficial. So total operating expenses of 120,000. So currently there's a budgeted surplus of 2984, which would of course increase the fund balance for the going forward. So that's really the budget that we passed at our finance committee meeting, and I presented to the board for approval and discussion.
Thank you. Questions or considerations associated with the budget that the finance committee has proposed?
I guess my question would be, can we approve the budget prior to our discussion on this contractual arrangement?
Yes, yes, we can. We are able to amend the budget. Right now, what the budget reflects is a dollar amount and anticipated spending. And, you know, we worked through this, and it was a little bit of a which do we do first? And I think it is important that the board have our arms around our spending plan before we talk about how to implement the spending plan. And if there are changes, we can amend the budget. It's due at the ABO on the 31st. And we are not as, fully in a position to enter into a contract at this time. Go ahead, Joe.
Yes, and Chair, I would strongly recommend, I mean, a budget is a living, breathing document. You can always amend it during the course of the year or fiscal year. And I would highly recommend that you file it timely so that there's a check the box at the ABO office with respect to making sure that you've timely filed the appropriate materials. That would be my strong recommendation.
Thank you, Joe. So underlying that is wanting to keep the decision of, who will ultimately step in as executive director and agency counsel with the board approval from the dollars associated with our staffing costs. I think those are two very separate issues, and we want to make sure there's some space in between the board's discussions about them.
I think, Victoria?
Yeah.
I think what we have is we have currently $50,000 placeholder for the executive director. I don't think the classification between salaries and IC is material item. So I don't see any reason why, if perchance we have to change it to a different classification, why we can't approve this budget if there's agreement. I don't know why we'd have to have a significant change that couldn't be filed this way.
Thank you. Are there questions about the revenue side of the proposed budget? Expenditures. Then I will make one further note and ask for a motion to adopt the budget for 2022 with the recognition that if we experience a material change, we can and will revise it, as Joe pointed out. And in fact, the Finance Committee last revised the budget in 2020 in response to the pandemic and all of the uncertainty we anticipated there. But along with the budget, I do want to continue to urge members to learn from and engage. We are members of two organizations, New York State Economic Development Council, which I keep sending you emails. The IDA Academy is coming up. It's a great event to learn. And we are also members of the Center for Economic Growth. And the Center for Economic Growth is in fact now officially leading the supply chain study associated with offshore wind, among their other efforts. And I urge all members to engage more and follow these organizations more, because we do derive benefit, and the more we engage, the more benefit we will get from those fees. But that's all that I have to say. May I ask are there any other questions or comments about the budget before we go to a vote? All right, then, do we have a motion for approval of the 2022 budget?
Sorry, I make the motion to approve the budget as recommended unanimously by the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second for Tim's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dave. Because the budget is so important, I would like to do the vote via roll call. So starting with who's where on my screen, I will ask Tim in moving. Are you also voting yes?
I vote yes.
Yes. Victoria Stores, I vote yes in favor of the budget. Dick?
Yes.
Yes. Dave?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
And Jared?
Yes.
That is unanimous approval of the 2022 budget. Thank you all very much this morning. The next item on our agenda, so the motion passes. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is communications, and I'll turn the floor over to Tom.
There are no communications.
Under old business, Rob Leslie is not joining us this morning. So he and I touched base this week on updates from the planning board. As we learned during the special meeting on October 13th, the Port of Albany will be submitting additional documentation to the planning board in connection with their seeker compliance review. So that is underway, and there are no updates on the progress of the Port of Albany through the planning process. But Rob is definitely going to continue to keep us up to date. I will also note that the town is continuing its process to seek a new economic development coordinator. That's an important staff member for the agency. And they are keeping, moving forward on that process, but there is nothing to report at this time. So moving to new business, we'll turn it over to Al for the financial statements.
Okay, we have the financial statements for September 30, 2021. The statement of net assets. Our cash account balance is $440,971.27. Other current assets, we have prepaid expense of $1321.31, giving us total current assets and total assets of $442,292.58. On the liability side, we have accrued expenses of $24,427.37. Those are monies due to the town for reimbursement of salaries and our service agreement. So our total liabilities are $24,427.37, giving us net assets of $417,865.21. And of course, total liabilities and equity of $442,292.58. Our statement of revenue expenses, fee income, $17,243.35. Regular fees, $67,838.64 on the PSEG energy reimbursements. On the expense side, salaries and wages, $36,426.06. Contractual expenses, $53,105.43. Employee benefits is $6,086.25. Our total expenses are $95,617.74. Year-to-date deficit of $10,535.75. We also had $65.20 of interest income and a $500 economic development grant on our PPE reimbursement. So our net income year-to-date is $10,975.55 or $970.55 deficit. And compare the net income to actual, you can see our fee income were $22,000 under what we hope. We have not closed the anticipated project that we budget. But on the plus side, PSEG energy reimbursement is on our expense side. Our salaries and wages are essentially in line. Our contractual expenses are 3,219.57 below what we budgeted. We always have a little wiggle room in that expense, and this year we haven't had to use any of that money. Other income and expenses, we got less interest income. There's just no market right now for interest on our accounts. If we take any money out of the M&T account, we'll end up paying more in bank charges. And our grants for economic development, we had budgeted much more than the $500 that we granted. So net year to date, we're actually $33,533.68 better than what we budgeted. Anybody have any questions on the September financials?
I just have a comment, if I may.
Sure.
Al, thank you very much. I just want to point out, Al, also included in your package, Al did an analysis of the 930 just reported, as well as a projection for the fourth quarter on page 13. I just suggest if anybody wants to look at that, it's pretty good, and it's really wonderful that we could have that when we discuss the budget. So Al did a 4Q projection, and it's in the package. Thank you.
It helps that we have a fairly static income and expense stream. That's there's very few surprises in our day-to-day operations.
Thank you. Before we go to item number 2 under new business, I realized that in reports of committees, I skipped items 5 and 6 about the Port District fees and the Port District Commission term sheet. I apologize for that. I think I was simply so excited about the passage of the budget. So what I would like to do is move items 5 and 6 under reports of committees under new business so that we can talk about those this morning. And to take them in order, I'll make a note about the port fees, turn the floor over to Joe Scott, and then we'll come back to Tom about our process for choosing. My information about my note about the port fees is that we have been talking. I've been talking with them about the value of the assistance, different needs, different fee structure, and we've been asked to establish and agree upon a term sheet with that Joe Scott is going to talk about this morning. So I'll turn the floor over to him.
Thank you, Chair. As was discussed earlier during this meeting, there was a status report, if you will, with respect to the current position of the project relative to the seeker review. And as was made clear in that discussion, seeker is not completed yet with respect to the project. Just by way of background, a GEIS with respect to the project was approved and seekered, if you will, with respect to the town and the town planning board, but due to some modifications in the project, there is a need for the port to go back to the planning board to get some subsequent approvals with respect to those changes, and those changes required some additional seeker compliance work. All that is relevant to you because, as you may remember, when this project was first presented to you, there was a hope that the board would be in a position to take final action with respect to the matter at this meeting. Frankly, there was some time sensitivity on the part of the port in terms of moving forward. And the goal was, assuming that the IDA was in a position to consider an approving resolution, that we would do so at this meeting. Because seeker is not done, the board legally, and we would not recommend it. And I've had several discussions with Tom on this point. We cannot adopt an approving resolution as a governmental entity. You can't take final action with respect to a project until seeker is completed. Failure to do so, or failing to comply with that, raises a question about the validity of the approving resolution considered and adopted by the governmental body. Based on discussions that we have had with my seeker partner and with the engineer that's working with the town planning board representatives on this seeker issue, it doesn't appear that this will be completed until early January. So this appears to be a matter for consideration at the January meeting of the board at the earliest. In discussing that with the port, an issue that I raised, and frankly is an issue that I've addressed with other IDAs and other project applicants and other contexts and with other IDAs, is that there has been some momentum generated. There has been, very productive discussions about the structure of the transaction, the business terms, the benefits being extended, et cetera. What we have seen and what we've actually participated in preparing is doing some sort of term sheet that would outline the basic terms of the transaction. The purpose being to provide some certainty on both sides of the table with respect to what is going to happen, but recognizing that the term sheet is a non-binding document. It's not a contract. It's not signed by the parties. It really looks a lot like, and several of you have had extensive business experience and continue to have extensive business experience, a commitment letter from a bank, which has written all over it, this is, these terms are preliminary, they're non-binding, they're subject to final review, they're subject to memorialization in actual contracts. So what the purpose there would be to provide and continue the momentum that has been generated with this, and frankly, to start giving certainty to people on both sides of, what this is all going to look like. Certainly as counsel, I can be preparing the documents. The documents would be helpful, or would be easier to prepare, obviously, if we have some general outlines, of the business terms contained in a term sheet. And so what I would suggest for your consideration is that in the next week or two, I work through a term sheet in draft form, distribute it to you all for your review, give you time, obviously, to review it, distribute it to the port. The port let the port obviously review it, and then if it's an acceptable form, you have it as an agenda item on your November meeting. So that's the explanation. And if there's any comments or questions, Chair, I'm more than happy to respond to them.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joe, you mentioned January, but I didn't quite get what action may be now anticipated for January. Was that action by the IDA, or was that action by the planning board?
Well, it's two. We expect, based on the discussions with the port's engineer, who is interfacing directly with the planning board and the planning board staff, that the planning board will give seeker clearance at the very beginning of January. Once that occurs, the board would then be in a position legally to consider, and I say consider, not adopt, because whether you adopt an approving resolution is your prerogative, but you'd be in a position legally to consider adopting an approving resolution with respect to the straight lease transaction. So it's really two actions.
Thank you.
Joe, if I may, is it contemplated that, let's contemplate that the project gets approved, because we're all hopeful that it does. Would the documents be drafted so that right after approval, it can be closed and move forward? Is that the thought process? So the term sheet plus the docs will be worked on between you and the IDA so that you're ready to roll right after approval by the board?
Absolutely. And the other issue here is we've had this discussion about contract flexibility and timetable. If a term sheet is approved, again, it's non-binding, but it gives people some comfort that the transaction is moving forward, and that would put the port in a position to continue its work on putting together the construction contracts in the fashion that they hope they are able to do with the involvement of the IDA in the overall structure of the transaction. So really what it does is it's an attempt to mitigate the situation that we're not in the position to do a final approval at this meeting or even, the November meeting. But absolutely, Dick, I would be working on, my office would be working on documents so that we would not, we wouldn't turn it on in January. We would hopefully be in a position to close shortly after the January meeting. Again, assuming that the board is moving forward on all this.
Just one more clarifying question about January. Does that build in the 30-day period that the Albany County Planning Board has to review and make recommendations to the town?
That's a level of detail that I can't comment on, Tim. I will tell you that a number of meetings that have taken place with respect to the seeker and local approval issues is north of 20. So my hope is that the professionals involved have that in mind. And when we got the information from the port engineer that early January was the expected completion date and approval date of seeker, that was taken into account, but I can't comment on that directly.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions for Joe about the plan for a term sheet and procedure for the port project? All right, thank you. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Madam Chair, I mean, is this something that the board, I don't think this rises to the level of a resolution at this point, but is the sense of the board that you would like to proceed along that path? And so you're giving direction to council for me to prepare a draft for your review?
That would certainly be my recommendation. Are there any comments or questions from members about having Joe proceed as he's described? So yes, thank you, Joe. Please go ahead as you suggest.
And thank you for the consideration. Thanks for the direction. Got it.
All right, our next item, I'll turn the floor over to Tom to give us a general overview of our procurement process for professional services.
Yes, the agency has a purchasing policy with a supplement entitled Guidelines for the Procurement of Professional Services. And that contains the rules that we should apply to our consideration of procurement of professional services for executive director and council. My understanding is that, one, that the agency seeks to contract with a single person who will provide the services of executive director and counsel. Two, that the possible price for the services will exceed $10,000. Three, that the relationship will not be one of employer-employee, but based on a contract for services. With those assumptions, under our supplemental purchasing policy for professional services, there must be an RFP. The RFP must be approved by the CFO prior to issuance. The person issuing the RFP will review the responses and make a recommendation for appointment. The board will make the final decision. If you were to separate the two jobs so that two different people could provide the services, there would be a different procedure, an expedited procedure for counsel only. The procedure for executive director would remain the same. So do you want to hear that, or just, assume that you're going ahead with a single person? Well, let me just tell you what it is, because it's short. If you were to seek contract services for counsel, the process could be initiated by the chair. In other words, the chair would select a possible counsel. The recommendation would have to be approved by the IDA attorney, and ultimately the board would have to approve, but there would not be an RFP process. That's it.
Tom, I'm sorry, is someone else, other questions? I'll hold mine.
Can you repeat, Tom, what you just said? I just
Pardon?
didn't get it. Can you go back through the last part of what you said to us?
So
Did you say that?
talking about selection of a counsel for contract purposes.
So you said if we separated the council and the position, then we wouldn't have, it could be done internally? Is that what you said?
Well, it's all internal to us. What I said is there is for selection of counsel,
Yeah.
there is a simplified process, but it's
Okay.
only for the council. And what would happen is you would have you would have one RFP for executive director. You would have a simplified process for counsel, and you could end up with two different people in the jobs.
Okay, my question, is this an internal regulation or is this statutory?
It's internal.
Then why can't we change it?
It's going to slow you down.
Why would it slow us down?
Oh, well, because every time we
If we change
draft a
the
new
policy?
policy, it goes through a number of iterations. You have to wait for the next meeting. And well, why is it necessary to draft a new policy? What's
Maybe
wrong
we
with
can make
this?
it I don't think the RFP, in my personal opinion, I don't think the RFP process in this specific contractual situation is warranted. I mean,
What's the
And that-
value of the executive director RFP? Because if the executive director's salary is under the 15,000, unless our procurement policy says something different, I don't see something in front of it. It may be exempt.
Well, I mean, in the budget, the executive director contract is 50,000.
That's the combined, that's
No.
for the two.
I thought there's a separate item for counsel at 10,000.
No, that's a special counsel, agency counsel for a specific transaction. So for example, for a future project.
No, okay.
not the ongoing services.
Personally, I'd like to make an exception of the policy and draft a new policy so we can move on. If everybody disagrees with me, like always, I'll be quiet, but that's my position.
What I would, but before we talk about changing the policy, I think Tom's point about timing is important. He is retiring at the end of December. He has earned it. We'll miss him. I hope he'll still take my calls occasionally as needed. But I think the timing here is very important. And the possibility of a revision to the policy or making an exception to the policy slowing us down is a very serious one. So I think we are assuming that an RFP process is long and arduous. So I would ask for some information. Where does it need to be posted, for example? Could we establish a very straight, we know what our needs are. How can we establish a very straightforward request, make sure that the most qualified people do see that and have time to respond, and keep within our existing policy in order to have a good timeline? So where does it need to be published?
Well, we select the places. I assume it would be the agency's website, the town's website, and EDC website. That's what we've used before when we're trying to hire a economic development employee for the town. Also, we give notice of openings for members of the agency. So that's what I would recommend. It doesn't have to be an arduous process. We used this process in 2012, the only time we've done it, because we had decided then to hire a CFO, not hire, but engage a CFO contract for services, and that's how we engaged Al.
And I might be, in addition to you, Tom, the only person on the meeting, well, Joe, who was there at that time, and I recall it as being a very straightforward process. So, Joe?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to the discussion, I think Tom does make a good point about extending the process if you change your policy, but I think what I would recommend or have you consider, and I think it kind of bootstraps on what Dick was talking about, is that you do a resolution determining to accept yourself from your policy and do it the way that you want to do this. And what I would recommend, if you're going to follow that course, is that you outline in your resolution why you're accepting yourself from your policy. And that way you're showing, diligence, you're showing thoughtfulness, you're showing, it's good practices to document why you're doing something. And there's good reasons here. So that would all make a good paper trail, a good, file, creation, if you will, with respect to the process that you're following here. So that would be my suggestion, and that might address the timetable issue that that Tom is raising, that you're raising, and that others have raised.
Yeah, I think the wrinkle is the position historically has been one position with two roles, and it's even budgeted that way, right? So I think, what Joe's saying, I guess, makes a lot of sense. And in that case, if you wanted to split the two, then that's a different story, obviously.
We have been proceeding on the assumption, based on Tom's service and the benefits that we've received through his service of having those roles combined, to continue to have them combined, absent an unknown, unforeseen, compelling reason. But my sense is that we've certainly seen the benefits of having those two roles together.
Victoria, I wasn't suggesting that you split the roles. I was trying to explain what the supplement said. That's all. And all you have to do is say we want a combined role.
does anyone want to have discussion this morning about whether or not to continue to have those roles combined? So I think the next question is whether or not we want to adopt a resolution. And I think it would have to be this morning, saying we are, exempting certain provisions of the policy. I would recommend that, since we're coming to the end of the year, that we be able to take a vote on a particular recommended applicant for those services at the November 19th meeting. I would really like to have the board fully comfortable going into December. Sometimes we cancel the December meeting. And certainly that will give us all some certainty going into 2022. So if
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Would it be, given that time horizon and those preferences, would it be possible to have the governance committee meet quickly, put their heads together, come up with a resolution for our consideration at the November meeting? So we're not trying to do this on the fly via Zoom this morning.
Could we, and I'm going to turn to Dave in a minute, could we at the same meeting adopt any resolution needed to adjust our process and resolve to engage a specific individual or firm for the services in the same meeting?
Victoria, I believe you could. Joe, what do you think?
To be honest, I'm not sure if I followed, and I guess I was stuck on the issue about changing policies and exempting yourself from your policy. Would you mind, Chair, repeating the question? And I apologize. I guess I'm a half step behind here.
So per your suggestion, in lieu of changing a policy, which is a much longer process,
right,
if we adopt the resolution that you suggested saying, we are waiving or exempting this particular aspect of the policy this one time, do that at one meeting, and then later on in the meeting following through on that, actually vote on a resolution to engage a specific individual or firm.
Well, I think legally you can do that. The issue there is the appearance, the optics. If you could do the resolution today to exempt yourself from the policy and then retain, have the decision at a subsequent meeting, that certainly works better from an optics standpoint. Both are legally sufficient, but I would, I simply raise the issue of optics. And I think while you don't have a resolution in front of you, certainly Tom and I could craft one to reflect the discussion point, if that's the sense of the board of how you would like to proceed today. So we could certainly put something together. And I am, again, I am sensitive to Tim's point about, the comment of on the fly. But again, I think from a relative standpoint, this isn't, this is, I don't want to say it's an administrative matter or a nominal matter or, but it's, it's something that, I don't think sets off a lot of alarm bells.
If I might, I just want to reflect for the record that I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion and any subsequent vote on those resolutions. I'll remain in the meeting, but I am going to recuse myself from that.
Thank you, Kate. Well, let's get to some kind of action or decision not to act this morning. If we did feel the need, I'm not sure that we need to waive or exempt any provisions of the professional services procurement policy. And I say this based on having responded to almost uncounted RFPs over the past several years. And the way Tom describes the policy, we do not have to post it for a specific number of days. So that is up to us and our judgment. We are not required to post it, for example, in a newspaper that has a long lead time. Certainly the venues that you mentioned are where we would expect people interested in serving us would be looking. And it can also be a very straightforward document. So if we are able to post in those places a, short, straightforward, these are the services, say by the middle of next week, ask for responses early in November, we could potentially be in a position actually to make a decision on selecting an individual and approving that individual or firm in November. So an RFP process, we are not required, that does not mean a competitive bidding, minimum number of bids, lowest bidder. That's not in professional services. So following, that's why it's important that Tom and I both mentioned the straightforward process by which we were able to engage Al 10 years ago. So I would propose that it's actually doable to follow our process and have responses and be able to make a selection on November 19th.
One clarifying question for Tom and or Joe. Is there any minimum amount of time that an RFP that of the kind that Victoria describes needs to be on the street?
No,
So given that, and given that our next meeting is basically a month from now or 4 weeks from now, if we
it's
can get
probably going to
some,
be earlier because of Thanksgiving, a week earlier. It's probably around the 15th
It's
of
the 19th.
November.
19.
so that's 28 days from today, if my math is correct. And so if we felt confident that we could put together quickly in the time horizon that Victoria just laid out, have it out there for a manageable amount of time for our purposes and for the purposes of prospective proposers, score quickly and make the agenda for November 19th, that makes sense to me.
Thank you, Tim. Does that also make sense? Dave, if we were in the same room, I would look at you as the chair of the governance committee for insight.
I guess my question, and I really apologize. I'm going to have to get off the call. I've got to be someplace immediately. But I think if you go the RFP route, and even if you could meet the November 19th, then you may get a number of proposals, and you then have to go through the whole review process. It's not a sole source contract, so I don't think you have any guarantee, even if you get the RFP condensed into a 28-day process, that you're going to end up selecting a contractor by November 19th. So I think anything we can do to avoid having to do that is something I would prefer we consider doing. And with that, I'll answer any questions, but I really have to get off within the next 2 or 3 minutes. So.
I agree with David. I think that we can do an exemption, whether you change the policy or exemption. I think it's the same. I think we can do that in less than a week. And then we can have it done. I don't see any reason why in this specific, you guys know I'm a little bit of a stickler for doing things by the book, but I think in this situation, we all know what's out there, that if we can expedite it, not go out to the street, I think we're better off, and it'll be quicker.
So with respect to the fact that David needs to leave, I don't want to then, we don't have a resolution in front of us. If you say resolve for an exemption in a week, we don't have a meeting scheduled until the 19th. I'm not sure that we save ourselves time or effort if we wait a week to do the exemption. We'd have to reconvene. So I fully understand Dave's point. I think that if we proceed under our current policy, perhaps we do get 5 proposals and we would have to review them more carefully. What would happen then is that we would be making a recommendation and asking for a vote in December. And I'm not sure that we get, if we decide to adjust the policy for this one time, I think that we're still in December. So I'm not sure what the difference is between the 2 paths.
But don't we have to approve as a board the RFP? Why wouldn't we have to approve the RFP? Why?
No.
Tom? Wouldn't we have to approve the RFP?
Only if you want to. It doesn't have to be board approved.
What I would recommend here is that Tom, as our current executive director and agency counsel, and I put together a draft RFP and circulate it to the members for comment. Under
That's
that-
fine with me.
Thank you. And I will check in with everyone so that everyone, does say, yes, this is fine, or no, please make the suggestion. So I really do want that.
Okay, I apologize. I'm gonna have to get off. I'm not gonna be available until about next Wednesday or Thursday. So if you need me, I'll, reach me by phone, but can't guarantee I'll be available. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
So in light of this discussion, Tom and I will put that together. We will remain sensitive to timelines associated with the policy, ask people to, put their attention to it. We'll get that up, probably look for about 10 business days for a response and circulate responses, which I would anticipate would be confidential among the board members on a confidential basis.
Sorry, one more clarifying question. Tom, based on what you said before, so Al has a role here to play as our purchasing or procurement person. He would play a role here, and then would it be he also who scores the RFP, or do we need people to engage in the evaluation of any proposals that come in?
Well, the policy doesn't require that. And, that's going to slow it down.
I just, we sound like we're moving down the path to seek these proposals. Somebody's got to do something with them when they arrive so that we can continue to move forward in the timelines that we've all been discussing here.
Yes, the policy says the person issuing the RFP will review the responses and make a recommendation for appointment. The board then will decide.
Okay, thank you.
So as a matter of practice, I think the front line, Tom and I would look at any responses. I would mirror the way the town board evaluates potential members at the IDA, which is eliminate any responses that are clearly not adequate or sufficient, and make a recommendation, but make the other ones available for transparency to the other members of the board, should we have more than, say, 2. And there is no minimum bid. There's no minimum number of bids. I'm not entirely sure, but when we engaged a CFO, Al's may have been the sole bid. I don't actually remember. Our policy does not require that we hold open the RFP to get a specific number.
So I guess I would just say thank you to all for thoughtful conversation here and for agreeing to do this additional work with a very short turnaround.
Thank you. Whew. And thank you for your contributions as well, Tim. Any other insights or questions about moving forward with that particular procurement? All right, I think that moves us to item number 8, future meetings. Our next regular meeting is Friday, November 19th, 2021 at 8 a.m. I anticipate, particularly going into bad weather, cold and flu season, that we will continue to meet via Zoom. And I would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed to the motion to adjourn? Any abstentions from the motion to adjourn? So I will mark that the motion passed unanimously. And adjourn the meeting at 9:09 a.m. on October 22nd, 2021. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you on the 19th.
Have a good day, everyone.
Aye.